Today we're going to paint a very simple watercolour painting, a little landscape using a wet into wet sky. The colours we're going to use are ultramarine, cerulean blue, lemon yellow and burnt sienna. The brush I'm using is a number 8 round and the paper I'm using is a £140 knot or cold pressed watercolour paper. So first of all, you need to wet the sky area, and only the sky area really at this point. If you can't see where you've gone, if you hold the paper to the light or angle your head differently, you'll see the shine of the water onto the paper. Now we want to come down about 2/3 approximately for the sky. So all we've got on at this stage is water. I then go into the water again, pick up my ultramarine blue and drop it on in the sky, and you can see immediately how it's mixing with the water already on the paper and spreads, and that spread creates a beautiful cloud effect without having to even paint any clouds in. So it's a great time saving device, wet into wet, so called because your paper is wet and your paint is wet. You can use a damp brush just to soften the edges and take off any runs that may have occurred from angling your paper. So very not too damp brush can just go over the edge of your clouds, and when you pick up some of the colour you can just dab it back into the clouds to create shadow, which will automatically give it more depth to your scene. So that's the sky already done. The wetter your paper, the bigger the spread. When objects in a landscape particularly are further away, they're paler and more blue in colour, but they're also cooler in colour. So I'm going to use cerulean blue, which is a cooler blue than ultramarine. Add a little bit of lemon yellow, not too much, and a very small dab of burnt sienna, and that will make the base of our hills. Now when you're painting your hills you don't want them too angular, unless you are painting the pyramids of Egypt. Keep it fairly bumpy and quite nondescript. Once you've painted that in, again with just a damp brush, just soften the edge, and then just adding a little bit of moisture, a bit of water, not too much, onto the bottom part, and then we're going in with the lemon yellow paint, and that's going to cover the whole of the bottom area that's left. Lemon. Sometimes I do this depending on the season that I'm painting. If you put a lemon yellow under, when you put the other colours on top, the lemon yellow will still shine through because watercolours are transparent, and you'll get a brighter, more acidic colour, which is excellent for spring and summer. If you're doing an autumn or winter scene, you could use yellow ochre to cover, and that would give you a more muted feel. With the yellow that I've got, I'm just picking up some of this green background, and as it's mixing, it's creating another shade of green, which gives me another plane of land. So that's automatically pushed back, only subtly, the first lot of hills that we've painted. I need to mix another green now, so I'll use this space. I'll just clean that off first with just some water and use some lemon yellow and ultramarine to make a mid-tone green. Needs to be slightly darker than the colour we've got there. I'll add a little bit of brown just to earth it up a little bit, burnt sienna, and then I'm just going to move my brush across using the whole side of the brush. Slightly darker colour next, so a little bit more ultramarine. Now watercolours dry 1/3 lighter, don't forget, so the colour you see isn't that you start with isn't going to be the colour that it ends up. It will dry a little bit lighter. So along here I'm just drawing a line, letting it spread a little and then dabbing, and that's going to create a tree line in the mid distance. You don't want too much detail, but enough to show that it's a tree and a few bushes. So we go back into the ultramarine, a little bit of burnt sienna and lemon yellow, a little bit of water, and we're going to bring in some foreground. I've done it at an angle just to make it look a little bit more interesting more than anything else. There's no particular reason why I'm doing that. Now what's happened while I've been painting that part, you can see that our line of trees has spread into the other part of the land. So with not a dry brush, a slightly damp brush, you can lift out the colour and stop the spread. I was going to have a tree, an old tree just here, and go into this colour again, so lemon yellow, a little bit of cerulean blue to make it bright, and then we just tap in with our round brush, starting off thinner at the top of the tree, tapping broader and wider as you get towards the land. Now obviously because watercolours are transparent by nature, yellow more so, you'll see some of the other colour of the elements of the landscape behind it, through it. But if you keep working over it, it will start to blend in with the yellow colour or the green that we've already got. Bring it down to about there. Now if I go into my ultramarine and burnt sienna mix, I can then tap on the left hand side of my tree, and we start to create a little bit of depth to it, because we now know that our light source is coming from the right. And again, this is only a very simple, quick landscape to show you how some watercolour techniques work. You can spend a lot longer working on your landscape. I'm adding a bit more burnt sienna now to that green, because tree trunks aren't just brown, they are a living thing, so you do want it more of a green shade than a brown shade. So with my round brush I rolled it, if you notice, and that gets a bit more of a point back. And then we paint just a few bits of branches, widen the trunk at the base. You can probably see a few branches through there. Add a bit more ultramarine, and you can create a bit of a shadow underneath your tree, just to emphasize where the light is coming from. And the beauty of watercolors is that you can then use pen work over the top if you wanted to emphasize the tree or any elements, or you can go over it with pastels, pastel pencils, watercolor pencils. It just depends on the effect that you're after. Go back in with a slightly darker color just to intensify the depth of shadow. The same with the tree trunk, slightly darker on the one side. If you struggle with that, trying to blend your colours, if you get a very slightly damp brush, you can suck up or lift out, as it's known, the colour from the paper, and that will give you more of a three-dimensional feel to your tree trunk. And then if you wanted to add grasses or anything to your foreground, you want the paint quite dilute, and then you can just go from the base and flick up, and by flicking up you automatically get thinner pointed lines like blades of grass, because you take the pressure away when you lift or flick away from yourself. And there you have it, a very simple watercolour landscape.